Welcome, everyone. What an energized day. This is the last of the 3 sessions. Here we're focusing on something that might be familiar to some of you, but perhaps not to others, which is the role of standards in the implementation of a whole lot of elements of the strategy, both standards that are, I guess we'll say voluntary, and standards that are mandatory. So there can be quite a range of conversations here. I'm just getting the session started, and Emil's going to introduce the speakers, and I think we're all very excited, and a number of us in the room are involved with standards development and really see it as a very, very promising avenue. Some of you are going to learn very new information and hopefully carry it back to your organizations and workplaces. So, Emil?
So welcome everybody to this session. We're going to follow the same format as some of the other parallel sessions you've been to. So we'll have the presenters present for 10, maybe 15 minutes maximum, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions. And we have a particular sequence here that we're following because our first speaker, David Brown, he's a medical consultant with an occupational health and safety training background, but he has been sitting on the Standards Development Committee for a work disability management system standard that the CSA group is developing, and I'm on that panel as well as a number of other people here, Maureen and Alec, Vincent as well. So a lot of people with backgrounds around standards development, and it was a new area for me when I first got involved with this technical committee at the CSA. So, and it's probably new to a lot of you. So David's going to give an overview of what standards are, their role, and how it fits into management practices. So he's been the medical director of CIBC for over 25 years. His primary interests are organizational health risk management, mental health, and the broader disability management field. He's been recognized for his work internationally. Hailing from Northern Ireland originally, he has maintained his interest in the outdoors and most of his accent. Take it away, David.
My task for today, in 10 minutes or less, I've been told, is to set the stage for my esteemed colleagues here, to secondly, talk a little bit about the standards, and in particular the CSA standard on disability management, and to also look at some of the competitive advantages of taking sort of a standards approach, or indeed a management systems approach. And then finally to sort of give you some thoughts on what a disability confident organization might look like or sound like. So that is my goal in 10 minutes. And so I don't know about you, but when I sort of get into definitions and whatnot, sometimes I glaze over. And I know it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I'm going to be very gentle on you and tell you, does anybody sort of off the top of their head understand what or know what a management system is per se? No, it's a foreign language to many of us. So I'm going to read you the sentence, and then I'll pick it apart. It's an approach that ensures a framework of policies, processes, procedures, and defined practices to achieve an organizational goal. It usually has an element of continuous improvement, and I'm going to come back to that later. So let's just pick this apart, because when I hear that, I sort of go, well, I think I know what he's talking about, but not really. The policies really sort of describe the direction, a strategic direction, and the principles by which a piece of work is going to be done. And I sort of think to myself of sort of like a yogurt factory or something like that. And you may say, well, we're going to make yogurt, we're going to make nice low sugar, low fat, use only local farmers, and we're going to set up this whole idea of a yogurt factory. So that's our sort of our policy and directional thing. Below that, then we have all the processes that go to do that, sort of the sourcing of the milk, the sourcing of the bacteria, the making of the plastic cup. And then you go down one level lower into the procedures, which is the way that these things get done, is sort of the activities that you do. And then finally, the practices tell us about the expected norms that you would expect this yogurt factory to make. Now, we haven't talked disability yet. Have you felt like you've gone over a cliff? No? Yeah, okay. So I haven't got you that far. Let's take you into the whole notion of standards development. And really, I mean, we've had standards for a while. You know, we have several calendars that exist around the world. We have good weights and measures, although we sort of might, they're constantly changing the exact number of atoms required to make 1 kilogram. But and the other thing that where standards really started to come to the fore, believe it or not, was in England in the 1800s when we were building railway engines. And so the train would set off from London to go to Bristol and would blow a screw or something in its boiler. Because they didn't mass produce screws and they'd no standard, somebody would have to make a screw to fit the hole and you go in, and so this would sort of hold up the train. And so the whole notion of having a standard, what a screw might look like, what its size might be, started to take off and had a lot of advantages. And that's sort of where the whole idea started to come from. We've moved way beyond that, and it's actually become one of the main measures now of how we look at an industry and how we look at a country. Do they sort of set standards for how things are done? And the main ones in Canada that I'm going to mention today are the CSA, who I think have got something like 4,000 standards from sort of various pieces of equipment to various processes and things like that. We've got the B&Q in Quebec, and we have the ISO that we're heavily involved in. So working on a technical committee, which is the group that makes the policy come to, or the standard come to life, what we do is we gather together this group of people, 25, 30 people. We give them a trusty leader who's sitting down here with, Emil was very subdued about his own role in this. And what we do is we get members from academia, from the working world, from government, and we put everybody in the room. And what we agreed to do is to work by consensus. And we all bring our experience to the meetings, and we say we are going to park where we come from, and we're going to work together with our various viewpoints to build a standard. And this really provides the philosophy, the principles, the policies, procedures, and the expectations. And that's really what a standard is all about. Now, the disability standard, which is the one that many of us in this room have worked on, has adopted also the plan, do, check, act sort of approach, which is where we plan to do something, we do it, we check to see if we did it properly, and then we act and look for ways of improving it. And this sort of cycle of continuous improvement is built in right into standards. Now, standards don't live in isolation, so we have multiple different standards. This happens to be about disability, and you can imagine it touches many others. And one of the roles of the technical committee is to look at the other standards and make sure where they overlap, that they meet and mesh well, so that when you get into a standard world, it starts to all come together. So let's talk disability management for a second. Most of us, when we think of disability management, or at least I did for many years, would just automatically think of return to work programs and insurance companies. And I have to tell you, that's the least of what we talk about when we're talking about disability management. There are multiple facets. There's the whole world of recruiting. There's the whole world of onboarding somebody when they join an organization. Once somebody's in the organization, there's the whole notion of continuity and accommodation. And then, you know, what happens if work changes come along or there's dislocations occur in the work? How do you promote people? And eventually, at the back end of somebody's career, or unfortunately, if they have to be let go, how do you help exit somebody from the organization in the best way possible? As you can see, there are multiple players in the disability world. We have the internal providers. Somebody like myself within CIBC is sort of the medical eyes and ears of the bank. And, you know, we've got 42,000 in Canada, another 9,000 or 10,000 around the world. So I get to see a lot of issues. I also get to work on the health and safety side. And so I'm sort of I've got the 2-minute warning. Okay, we're not going to do it in 2 minutes. So we have the external providers, whether the insurance companies or various other providers, And we have things like compensation boards, which we're going to talk to in a minute or two. The other standards related to the disability standard are the ergonomics, hazard identification. There are about 10 or 12 that are all related to this. So why might an organization go down the route of a system or standards approach? Well, based on what I've just told you about the team that put together a standard, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's the opposite question. The problem is that very few people ask the question, and what is an organization starts small, it grows, and you don't need to have very large systems in place to keep it going. And then all of a sudden it reaches a size where all of a sudden the topsy-turvy development starts to falter. And then most organizations are into the point where somebody owns it. Joe owns the health and safety. Christine manages the insurance thing. And you can just imagine the larger the organization, the more Joes and Christines there are all over the place. And so you get into silos and things get more and more difficult. Where a standard really can help is it can give you the architecture, it can give you the knowledge and the wisdom of all of the people in the room in the standards thing, and allow you to bring these things together and look at them in a very systemic way. So what are the benefits of this? Well, very simply, it's the right thing to do. People always start with the dollars and cents. And it's actually the last place. And I'm a banker, so I mean, if the banker's talking about dollars and cents in the last place, really it's the right thing to do. It's a corporate responsibility that is absolutely paramount. And by the way, the public does notice the good and the bad, and so we pay attention to it. Employee engagement goes up dramatically, and you know, the company looks out for me. This is worth something. Productivity increases, presenteeism declines, and we have less delays in return to work. I know there's one lawyer on the team here, but if you think of the last time you ran into a legal issue in your workplace, what was the opening bid on the legal fees? It was $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. You can't say that, you know, being preemptive and doing the right thing doesn't have back-end returns for you. So the whole idea of a standard is that the base is we meet the standard of the law, but the standard actually flies above the law and gives you better direction. So what is disability confidence? It's when, in my humble opinion, when an organization stops seeing disability as a problem and starts to see it as simply a workplace factor. Like scheduling, like this, like that. It's nothing more than that. We have to actually get it to that level. And an organization that does this well will shine, and you'll shine through. And you look at companies like Microsoft, who've really sort of reached out and have a very, very powerful inclusion program. Managers need to be able to observe, listen, and communicate effectively. So there's a huge educational component here that goes with the culture of an organization. Workers and managers need to know how to access the expertise that they need to get things done and to get the supportive tools. For example, CIBC, we actually put facilitators in with managers and employees to help them work things out. Stop. And it comes really down to caring and communication. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Vince.
That was really great, though. It's starting to make sense to me now. Good going. Okay, so our next speaker is Vincent Russell. He's also been on the technical committee of that Work Disability Management System standard that we've been speaking about. Vince represents more of the service provider perspective on that panel, and he works with WorkSafe BC, which provides obviously workers' compensation services. He's been at WorkSafe BC for 26 years. He's held a number of senior management positions there, developing and leading key strategic initiatives. As director of Prevention Risk Analysis Unit, he led the development of this unit designed to provide improved prevention risk intelligence, detection, analysis, targeting, intervention, and measurement. So it's a long list of skill sets that he has here. Okay, as Director of Service Strategies, he led the development of WorkSafe BC's new customer-focused claims strategies. And then
That's it. You're eating into my time.
Okay, that's it. Yeah, 5 minutes left only. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. If you want to add a few more of your incredible CV stuff, that'd be great.
Thank
Take
you.
it
That's
away.
very
Vince,
kind of
please.
you. So I'm going to sit down because I don't want to eat up any of my time. And I'm French Canadian, so hopefully my French accent doesn't come out. I get the Irish and now I get the French. So many of the roles that I've worked in, we look at implementing systems. And the question asked to me was basically how can service providers and disability programs such as workers' compensation help support the development and implementation of management systems and disability confidence. And first I want to point out that the development and implementation of management systems and disability confidence are really two separate things. And so I want to talk first about disability confidence, which I really think should be disability competence. Oh, sure. I've been asked to slow down. So I'll get some extra time there, hopefully. So disability confidence, which I think really should be disability competence. But before we even start talking about disability competence, we need to think about disability awareness. We're not going to get people involved, energized, and competent about disability until we make them aware and until we make them engaged. Disability can't continue to be thought of something that happens to someone else. And as I get older, I realize that being non-disabled, it's being non-disabled that's temporary. And we're all going to be disabled in some form or another in our lifetimes. So we need to make this a societal issue. And for compensation boards, this is particularly important. Compensation boards need to move away from the model where the first time employers hear about return to work or disability management is the first time we speak to them about a claim. We need to move away from this inefficient, one-on-one transactional approach, which is basically a push model, to one of creating greater awareness about disability, work disability prevention, a pull model where employers, workers, and unions are already aware of and believe in the benefits of return to work. We need to bring awareness of work disability prevention to the same level as we have with workplace safety. And why? Because employers need to take the lead. Remember, without employers, there are no jobs. And with all due respect to other representatives of compensation systems that might be here today, workers' compensation boards typically don't do a great job of keeping workers attached in the workplace in the first 4 weeks after an injury. And those first 4 weeks are an area of opportunity for employers and unions to keep workers attached to the workplace and to help them avoid workplace injuries from becoming disabling. Compensation boards can play a very key role in creating awareness of the benefits of return to work and work disability prevention. We have lots of resources, and we can help shift the conversation as we have with safety, and we can also help reduce stigma. So that's the first thing we should do. This should include general awareness as well as focused outreach to the physician community. The idea is to create a culture of return to work, that pull environment I mentioned earlier.
Okay, we're starting up again. We've got the mics working, and Vince, if you want to backtrack
Yeah,
a little
backtrack a
bit,
bit.
that might be good, just so we get it all right. Okay.
Okay. Oh, I only used 2. There we go. So
You lost 5 minutes.
no, I got. So I was sharing that story of one of my managers, Patrick, whose friend was injured, and when Patrick was talking to his friend, said, "Hey, how long were you off?" And his friend came from an organization where the culture was that where your employer would accommodate you and you would be able to stay at work. And so his response was, "Well, why would I take any time off?" And so even people that are kind of immersed in this, sometimes our attitudes are that we don't think about these things. So I think what we need to do is create a culture where injured workers think, of course I'm going to go back to work, and where employers think, of course I'm going to take my injured workers back. And I'd like to point out that such a culture would benefit all people living with disabilities, not just workers that are injured at work. So compensation boards and other organizations can and should create this return to work culture through awareness, outreach, and by being a role model of best practices. But as you know, awareness isn't enough. It may create the desire to learn more, but there has to be more to be learned. And this brings me to my second point about what organizations like mine should be doing. First, you need the awareness, and next, we need to create how-to tools and resources for employers, workers, and unions. Yes, there are some out there, but there aren't enough, and often they're too lengthy and too difficult to use. We need to create easy-to-use tools and resources that get measured not by how many times we've given them away, but get measured by how many times they were used and by how many people they actually helped return to work. And the third thing that compensation boards need to do is to provide seminars and courses that are widely available that teach work disability prevention in a way that's not theoretical, but immediately applicable. Fourth, compensation boards need to engage with academic institutions to embed the benefits of return to work in the university curriculum, in the training of physicians, in the training of OTs, in the training of PTs, and in business courses. Our business leaders need to understand that work disability prevention is not only good business, as we heard this morning, it's a profitable thing to do, it's also the moral and ethical thing to do. And it's also an effective way to deal with the labor shortages we are facing. Which brings me kind of to the first part of the question is, how can service providers and disability management programs, such as workers' compensation boards, help support the development and implementation of management systems? Compensation boards should actively promote management systems. Doing so allows us to do all those things I talked about before, because management systems provide the directional beacon. Doing so moves return to work into a management system, and employers are used to management systems. It's how they run their business. They have accounting systems. They have all kinds of ISO standards in larger manufacturing that they're accountable to. And even small businesses, who are perhaps too small for a full-blown management system, a standard like the CSA standard provides a directional beacon. We know that management systems work. The recent Institute for Work and Health report showed that workplaces certified through the Certificate of Recognition Program, which is a health and safety management program, have greater reduction in time loss injury rates than non-certified workplaces. Management systems set a framework for processes, roles, and expectations. They externalize the process so there's no surprises. And this is good for unions, for example, who can hold the employer to account to meeting the standards. So how can organizations like mine promote the adoption of management systems? By participating on standards committees, by actively promoting the benefits of management systems to the employer and the union community, by working individually with employers and assisting them to implement work disability prevention programs based on accepted standards, such as the CSA standard, and by creating internal awareness of such standards with board staff who interact with employers. So to summarize, organizations like mine can help support the development and implementation of management systems and disability confidence by creating awareness, creating useful how-to tools and resources for employers, workers, and unions, and measuring their impact on improving return-to-work outcomes, providing seminars and courses on how to implement a work disability prevention program, working with universities and college to embed disability management principles in the curriculum, and by actively promoting work disability prevention management systems such as the CSA standard. Thank you.
Thanks, Vincent. I'm not sure about you, but I feel like I'm sold on standards now. Okay, so it's a good way to go. In fact, we're going to scale it up to a different level. I'm really proud to have our next speaker here, Paul-Claude Berube, who's going to talk about CASDO. You've probably heard that terminology thrown around a bit today, the new Canadian Accessibility Standards Development Organization. And Paul-Claude Berube is a chair of CASDO. And he's also a lawyer in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu in Quebec. He's a member of the International Senior Lawyers Project since 2009. And he's also provided pro bono legal assistance to governments and civil society organizations in India, South Africa, and Kenya. Now, the bio here that I have is quite long, so I'm going to cut it a little bit shorter here. From 1999 to 2008, he was the national chairperson of the Board of Directors for Independent Living Canada, an organization designed to facilitate greater independence through active and meaningful involvement of persons living with any form of disability. He also has extensive experience in municipal politics, as well as the education and health sectors. So, Paul-Claude, take it away.
Thank you. It's work? Yep. Good afternoon. How many of you speak French? Oh, good. I was doing my presentation in French, but I'm joking. I do it in English. But you will have to hear my big French accent for sure. So I'm delighted to be here at the Disability and Work in Canada Conference 2019. I've been asked to speak about the Canadian Accessibility Standard Development Organization. It's long, eh? We prefer to say CASO, OSENA in French. So, and I'm pleased to tell you that we have 4 other board members of CASDO here in this room. Corey Earl is there, and Bill Adair is behind. And Maureen Han, I do not see her anymore, but she was here a few minutes ago. And we have the vice chair, Mary Reed, just here at the front of the room. So you have the opportunity to meet this afternoon with the half of our board, 5 persons on 10. So it's always a privilege to exchange with so many accessibility professionals from Across Canada. C'est un honneur de représenter l'Organisation canadienne d'élaboration de normes d'accessibilité aujourd'hui. I will provide an overview of CASDO mandate and to talk about Bill C-81, the Accessible Canada Act, from which CASDO was born. We do not have the PowerPoint presentation, I guess, eh? No? I provide with this before, but I will tell you just right now, because I don't want you to avoid to tell it. If you want to have a PowerPoint presentation of what I will present to you today, you just have to write to CASDO office, and I will provide at the end with the email address, and then we will send it to you. Okay? The microphone is better now. So. Okay, I will also touch on our 7 priority areas for standard development. First of all, Bill C-81 received royal assent on June 21, 2019, and came into force on June 11, 2019. It's pretty new. The Accessible Canada Act created 3 separate entities. First, the Chief Accessibility Officer, who will report directly to the Minister of Disability and Inclusion. And second, the Accessibility Commissioner, who is part of the Canadian Human Rights Commission under the Department of Justice. And third, but not least, our organization, CASDO. It's an we can say arm's length organization that is as oversight by a board of directors and that will report to Parliament through the minister responsible for the Accessible Canada Act. Currently, this is the minister responsible for disability inclusion, Honorable Carla Quattro. So CASDO will recommend standards to the minister, who may adopt these standards through regulations that would apply to federally regulated organizations. Part of our mandate is also promoting research on barrier identification, prevention and removal, and sharing information related to accessibility. Our mandate also includes developing products and tools in relation to the accessibility standards. We will also distribute information on best practices in identifying, removing, and preventing barriers. Now turning to priority areas. We have 7. The Act mentions 7 priorities for standard development. As I go through the list, please remember they are all priorities and not listed in order of priority. One of those priorities is, of course, the built environment. For built environment standards, we are first looking to exemplary domestic and international accessible design standards and codes. We will develop standards to be fully inclusive of the diversity and disability experiences that exist in Canada and beyond. A second priority is procurement. When talking about procurement, processes for buying and acquiring goods, services, and facilities, we want public sector organizations to include accessibility criteria. This means you must consider accessibility where possible, along with other criteria like the quality and cost of the items. Another priority is employment. And I'd like to say about this one that it has been identified as the first priority for this year for this organization. So we will be ready to begin to develop standards development as soon as possible after February 2020. And not in 2 years, but very soon. A role of CASDO, I have to say first, as the Government of Canada strives for a more inclusive workplace, the objective is to hire 5,000 persons with disabilities by 2025. It has been announced previous to the Act. A role CASDO will play is developing new employment standards. We must generate conditions that are inclusive and increase labor force participation and purchasing power amongst persons with disabilities. Keeping in mind the ultimate goal of a barrier-free workplace, the employment standard will focus on fostering equitable recruitment, hiring, retention, emergency response, accommodation, performance management, and career development practices. Removing and preventing barriers, all of them, physical, technological, and attitudinal. Another priority is communication. This priority was added following the consultation process that led to the Act because stakeholders expressed this was an important issue that should be addressed separately from information and communication technologies. Accessible communication benefits all audiences by making information clear, direct, and easy to understand. It takes into consideration the various barriers to accessing information and provides opportunities for feedback. All federally regulated entities provide important information to Canadians, and that information must be accessible to all Canadians. Yes. Another priority refers to the design and delivery of programs and services. Again, it's important that all Canadians have an equal chance of accessing and benefiting from programs and services. Canadians with disabilities want to and must be offered real choices to have the opportunity to decide how services are provided to them. I like this one. You too, eh? It's clear that people want opportunities to let businesses and organizations how, when they have service issues, and where improvements can be made. Each person is an expert in how best to provide services to them. This could be done a number of ways, but organizations should begin by looking at the redesign of their physical sites of delivery for programs and services to ensure universal accommodation to people with a range of disabilities and experiences. Organizations should be working to provide appropriate training of staff to deliver a high caliber of client service to persons with disabilities to ensure full inclusion and participation in or access of public programs and services. Yes. I saw her. Transportation. I'm not going to talk about this because I have just one more minute, but just to recall that CTA is the Canadian Transportation Agency is responsible to develop the standards for transportation under the Act. Another priority for standard development is information and communication technology. For federally regulated broadcasting and telecommunication services, the Act leverages the existing mandate of the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, commonly known as the CRTC. The acts provide that the CRTC would increase responsibilities related to oversight and enforcement of statutory obligations. So the focus today is on standards development, but CASDO mandate is more than standards development. We will develop and revise accessibility standards setting on how federal, private sector organizations and government of Canada, departments and agencies can prevent, identify, and remove barriers to accessibility. The second one is we will establish technical committees soon that will be responsible for developing accessibility standards and will include various experts, including persons with disabilities and industry representatives. I like this one more. You know what? I'd like to tell you something. When I arrived at this organization, it was important to me to teach to our staff that persons with disabilities are the first experts when they have to talk about accessibility needs. So it's why we refer everywhere in our documents now as persons with disabilities as experts. And when we are talking about persons with disabilities to be consulted, yes, we will do it because it's mentioned in the Act 16 times in the Acts, you know. We will have to consult persons with disabilities. We will do it, and they will be considered as experts. Unfortunately, I think that I spend all the time that I have for you today. Thank you so much to hear me.
Thank you so much, Paul Claude. We have the most polite timekeeper. She's almost afraid to put up the stop sign. Okay, so thank you. That's really helpful to get a good sense of all the great things that CASDO is going to be doing. So now we're going to take it a bit more broadly. So we've talked a lot about standards. Our next speaker, Jordana Globerman, is going to talk about another angle to the notion of developing good practices. So Jordana is a strategic designer and graphics facilitator from Ottawa. She works as an innovation advisor to the Employment and Social Development Canada Innovation Lab, where she uses human-centered design to enable collaborative problem-solving between government and citizens. So Jordana has worked internationally with public and private sector clients, including Fast Company, KPMG, PWC, to bring caring, creative transformations to services, products, and organizations. So Jordana, take it away.
Thank you, Emile. I wanted to thank everyone for having me today. It's a pleasure and an honor to share with my panelists, with David, Vincent, Paul Claude, and of course with all the experts in the room today. So thank you for having me. So I'll tell you a little bit about the ESDC Innovation Lab, and then I'll go on to tell you a little bit about our project, how it relates to the Accessible Canada Act, and the help we would like to get from all of you in the room today. So the ESDC Innovation Lab is a user-centered design lab. I'll go into what that entails in a moment. But the way we function is like a consultancy for the department. So anyone in Employment and Social Development Canada can come to us with a problem that they're having that they think could benefit from creative solutions and more collaborative solutions. And we take on ones that we believe could really benefit from insight from users. So that would be people that are most affected by the policies, the programs, and the services that government offers. And our role in these projects is to bring in that greater user insight and to actually involve those users in the design of these programs and policies from the very beginning, so from the very concept stage of these projects. So we use various methods to do that. I myself work mostly within design thinking, and it was interesting, David, hearing your plan, do, check, act approach. It is in many ways similar to how design thinking works. So design thinking actually has 5 stages: empathy, framing, ideation, prototyping, and testing. But it has 3 distinct principles to it. So one is that it really seeks for continuous improvement. So we're always looking to improve ideas, to test them with the people that will actually be using them, and to improve them based on the needs of users. It also seeks for, so this empathy stage is the real grounding of the process. But what that is it's bringing very distinct and very different and diverse perspectives together to help foster a shared understanding and to really build from there. And finally, but most importantly, is that user insight. So the entire methodology really hinges upon the people that the products are affecting being involved from the very beginning in this design process. So we have been brought in to work with the Accessibility Secretariat on a project that we're calling the Accessible Canada Act in Application. So as has been mentioned several times today, there are different deliverables that federally regulated industry will have to meet under the regulation. So one is the creation of accessibility plans. And these plans have to consider all the operations of this industry. So it's not just the employee, it's not just the consumer, it's every facet of the industry. And as well as consultations, so those plans need to be developed with persons with disabilities. And we want those consultations to be meaningful. We don't want them to be a superficial check. So the other thing would also be feedback mechanisms so that people can then feed back on what is developed, and this can be continually improved. And what we want to do is involve both persons with lived experience, and so that means persons with disabilities and diverse persons with disabilities, as well as federally regulated industry, in developing some of these best practices and some of these approaches to plans, to consultations, and to feedback. So we want to get people together to really explore what some of the barriers are right now, how these can be properly addressed within plans and consultations, how we can enable industry to actually meet these regulations, but go beyond just the bare minimum of what they have to do to really understand accessibility and integrate the thinking of accessibility into all of their practices. And to develop maybe some tools to enable this and some best practices that can be developed and can continually be improved as standards are also being developed. And so what will come out of this will inform the guidelines. It'll be shared throughout government, so it might also inform standards to some respect. And so we will be engaging with, like I said, industry and persons with disabilities throughout the next few months and into 2020. We have different ways of doing this. So different forms of qualitative research. We have been doing literature reviews, we've been doing interviews, and we'll also be having workshops. But what is really key to this approach is so we are not experts in accessibility, but what we specialize in is bringing people together with very different perspectives to have really collaborative conversations and build solutions that can benefit everybody. And because our process is a process of discovery, where we go with it really depends on the perspectives integrated into the process. And so today and tomorrow, we've set up a booth to talk more about the project with people, but also to stay in touch with you for these workshops and for some of the work that we'll be doing, because really where we go with this and what we develop is entirely based on the expertise that we have access to. So we welcome any questions, and we really welcome any engagement with this project. We really rely on the insight of the participants in this case. Thanks.
Well, thank you all. That was a great panel. So we're opening it up now to questions and comments and any other kinds of contributions people want to make related to the topic of good practice, best practices, standards, and anything else that's related to that broader area of how we can get employers and their management systems up and running to be inclusive. So there's a roaming mic here. Put up your hand if you want to comment or ask a question.
Hi, I was interested, I think it was Vincent was saying an approach to employers that is about disability, work disability prevention systems. And I work with the Manitoba government where we're promoting accommodations. And I see the word disability prevention as an approach. I like the first speaker talked about disability being a fact. How does the disability prevention complement a message that disability is a fact?
Sorry, how disability is a fact?
Well, so in Manitoba, 1 in 4 people are affected by disability. So we want employers to think that your employees have disabilities, get on with it, kind of thing. Whereas your messaging was preventing disabilities, disability prevention in the workplace. How do those two things work together?
Yeah, so just, I mean, my bias, or my whole work has been in workers' compensation system. So, and my experience and our experience is that where, we get relatively minor injuries in some cases that become disabling down the road. And so our message, one of the messages that we're trying to weave behind workplace disability prevention is that workplace injuries don't need to become disabling. They might still have a physical impact, as you would imagine, but most of those can be accommodated. And so our message to employers is, don't wait for your worker to go away and then for them to come back at some point. Work with them right from the start. As soon as you notice something has changed or shifted, work with them right from that start and accommodate them early on, and you'll prevent it from becoming more disabling. That's not to take away the fact that we get some very serious accidents that are tremendously impactful on individuals' lives. But our message to employers is, but those individuals can continue to work, and chances are you don't have to wait 3 or 4 or 5 years or for a bunch of appeals for you to take them back earlier on. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Thank you.
There's someone over here.
Well, it can go to all of you. I understand what you are saying, that you just mentioned, and I agree with what you're saying, but I think my own personal view is that you have to take a step back, okay, from what you're saying. I think you're missing the part about, like I wrote it here, like you said about being a role model. I think you're missing the point that how many people do you have in each of your organization that are at the top level that have a disability? Like, I have people that have disabilities. I have a disability. And one thing, like they hear people talk like what you're saying, and they stop listening. Their wall comes up, because what happens is they can't see you as a role model. They can't see what you're saying makes any sense, because when they look up, they look at your organization, you never have anyone with a disability above $30,000 a year. You have people with disabilities, but they're at the very low level. Like, if you can tell me that I'm wrong, like I Googled almost all the companies here. Now, I'm talking about disabilities where they're seen. Like I agree with you, someone said, everyone has disabilities. But I'm talking about disabilities that people see. They're not blended anymore. People can see them. No, they don't. It's very low level that they get in.
Do you want to start with that, Vince?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, I didn't say we are role models. I said we ought to be role models. So I think that the points that you make are valid. I think that we've seen certainly in our organization, my organization, in more diversity in our organization, and I know that a couple of individuals on our senior executive do have disabilities. I don't want to, violate their privacy here, but there are a couple. I do think we could do better, though. I think we're a microcosm of the bigger society that we need better inclusion for sure, and I think we need to do a better job on that. So I'd agree with you.
David, do you want to add anything?
Sorry, David.
So I accept your point about the physical disability or parent disability. I shared the stage on Friday with a senior vice president of the bank who deals with very significant anxiety disorder. And we were in a group setting such as this, and she told her life story and certainly enthralled the room and showed how she had not totally surmounted it, but had managed it down to a point where she could live with it and be successful. And so I think as more and more people, whether it's on the invisible side, come out and tell their story, I think that we're on a road here. And when you think where we were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we've come a long way. So yes, it's far from perfect, but I do think that people are listening and trying to make a difference. And and I can really only speak to the invisible side of that. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience or comments?
I'm just gonna.
Oh, you want to respond to?
And then I'll be quiet.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
no, don't be quiet, please. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm really sorry, but I just want to say one thing, okay? I just spoke on this, so I'm just going to say one thing. I spent my whole life blending, okay? I have a severe, severe disability in hearing, and I blended. And I went to top senior management, okay? My whole life doing senior management because no one knew. So what I'm saying, your examples are blending, okay? So no one knows. Well, you told us, but I'm just saying, when someone has, and they're very hard, I'm not saying one's easier than the other, I'm just saying when you're able to blend and you're able to go to an interview, okay? So when you can sit and do an interview and the person interviewing you doesn't know of your disability, then they look at your qualifications. And more apt, if you have the qualifications, you can get through. What I'm saying right now, the way our system works, if you have a disability and they can see it during the interview, more likely you don't get through. That's all I'm saying. You don't blend anymore. So I'm saying with what you were, not you personally, but what some of you were saying was that I'm just saying sometimes we might have to take a little step backwards because sometimes it's good to see people with disabilities that others can see, that it's not hidden. They can see, oh, wow, there's someone that has a disability. Hey, you know what? I can actually get that job one day. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we definitely need more role models in senior positions. I would definitely agree with that. Anybody else who has some? Frank, put your hand up, Frank? Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you.
So I give the mic to you.
Oh, yes, okay, sorry, yes. I'm just told that Slido's not working for this session. That's why we've been kind of ignoring it. Sorry about that.
Thank you for your presentations. I have one question for Casdo. How will the 7 accessibility standard pillars ensure that sign language is included? Sign language is recognized as the primary languages of deaf people in Canada within the Act, recently passed. So how will you incorporate that? If you, hopefully you have some kind of answer for me.
Did you want to answer that? Can it be just quickly repeated? Okay, there we go, okay.
Yes. I did not have the opportunity to say that, of course, all the standards we will develop will be linked to all kinds of disabilities, and not only about mobility disability, but it will include all kinds of disabilities. So when you're talking about the one of the priority, it will apply to all the kinds of disabilities. Same thing for the second priority, the third priority. We will always work for all kinds of disabilities. It will for sure include the sign language. And I have to say, sign language in English and sign language in French, yes. That is not, yes. That it's different. Yeah.
Okay. Did we have a hand up here at this table? Yeah.
Of course, there's more that can be done, but I also want to remind everyone that for the first time ever, there's a federal government board that has been hired people with disabilities for the first time, and that is a huge step in the right direction. And so, Claude, can you explain more of that? Because I think the board, as we were talking, it's the first time ever in this country, and we have to recognize that the government has taken steps. More can always be done.
So, you want me to answer it? Okay, you, Corey, you want to know about what exactly? Sorry, because I did not understand what your question. Can you
bring the mic
repeat
back
it?
for him?
Just explain to everyone about the board that's been in place, because it's
Yeah.
the first time.
Yeah,
that
okay. Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Oh, there you go. See?
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I have to say, first of all, this is that's real. This is the first time of the history of this country that we have a federal organization led by a group of persons with disabilities.
That's great.
The board is composed by a majority of persons with disabilities, and we have many employees who works at the office right now who are persons with disabilities. At the moment, I think we have 14 persons working at the office. We will be 52 at the end of the 2020, and the majority of them will be persons with disabilities as well. So let me tell you something more about this concept. You heard just a few minutes ago about the fact that we will consult persons with disabilities, and that it has to be very well understood where are always important for this new organization that we have persons with disabilities involved everywhere in the process. So I mentioned, and it's true, that in the Act there are 16 places it's mentioned that persons with disabilities and their organization have to be consulted, not at the end of the process, but at each step of the process. At the beginning, to establish priorities, we have to consult persons with disabilities and their organization. It is always, we will have them involved in consultation at the beginning of the process. So when we will establish what we call internal committees, the internal technical committees, then we will have persons with disabilities and their organization include in these technical committees. So this is true, and not only because of the Act, but because of the person with disabilities, they are on the board particularly. We are your eyes, we are your ears, we are your nose, you know. We are there to be sure that in every time the federal government and the office will respect the fact that persons with disabilities have to lead this organization. When a few months ago, I saw the first draft talking about the priorities, and it says, look at that. Person with disabilities, we will have on technical committees, person with disabilities and their organization, experts, and stakeholders. I said, no, you did not understand something. You should write it. We will have on these technical committees, person with disabilities and their organization, other experts and not experts, because you have to consider that person with disabilities with their groups are also experts. So it is in my mind. So be sure that we will act accordingly. Each step, we will work with this new organization. Okay?
Thank you. There's a question in the back there. Who has the roaming mic? Okay, there you go. Okay, good.
This is a question for my boss, Paul Claude. Congratulations on your appointment, and I'm happy to assure everybody in this room that the organization is in fabulous hands with a man who has great passion and great vision for transforming our country. So, Paul Claude, welcome and thank you. My question is around the amazing work that has taken place in developing the strategy around disability and work. And we heard this morning that there are at least 800 points of input on the strategy that's been developed. It's been underway for quite some time. And my question is, understanding that one of the priorities identified by CASDO for our first area of a standard to work on being employment, how will we take what the knowledge that we have here and the intelligence we have here, which has been informed by people with disabilities and employers across the country, how will we use that in developing the standard on employment?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for your question, Bill. As I stated in my presentation, the first priority who has been established is, of course, employment. And the way we will develop the standards about employment is complicated, but it's pretty simple as well. Look at that. First of all, we will have technical committees to develop standards. We will have one technical committees for each sector. So if you talk about 7 priorities, you talk about seven technical committees. So we will have one technical committee particularly assigned for what we consider employment as a priority. Then groups, I told you before, groups of person with disabilities, and person with disability themselves, and experts, other experts, I have to say, other experts and other stakeholders. Many groups who are involved in the development of the standards for employment will be involved in this technical committees and will provide with their knowledges, with all the skills and competencies that we will use to develop the best standards for employment. We will do exactly the same for all the priorities of CASDO. The process will not just a one-way discussion. First of all, we will establish the priorities inside the employment where we would like to work on at the beginning. Because, developing priorities for developing standards for this priority, it could take something like 2 years and a half. So we will begin in 2020, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be finished by the 3 next months. It will take time to develop all the standards. But we will have to establish priorities inside of this priority with the group. And then when we will have something ready with the contributors inside of the groups, we will provide it. We will send it to the community of persons with disabilities. And then we will ask them to contribute with their views, with their comments, with their suggestions, with their question. And then all the Canadian community will be invited to contribute on this before to go somewhere else. Then it's going to be revised. It's going to be returned to the technical committee for improvement. And then at the end, when it's going to be ready to be established as a standard, it's going to be approved by the board, who is also composed by a majority of persons with disabilities, and then sent to the minister to have it as a regulation. So this process, like I explained before, it makes that we will have persons with disabilities and their groups being consulted, not only consult, but involved in the process. Is that okay with you? Yeah?
That's good. There's another question back there, yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. Actually, it's more of a comment. So I've been looking at the board for CASDO, and you know, the board holds a lot of power. There's a lot of privilege in being on a board, and so what I'm seeing is that it's, again, majoritarily mainly white and older, and that does not represent most of Canada. So I'm just wondering how you're addressing these gaps. There's one tokenized, racialized person on that board, so I'm just, you know.
Okay. You know, we have in the Act the obligation to have a board representing the diversity of this country. And it's also in the bylaw of the organization. And we have to respect all the minority groups, and we have to respect all the kind of disability, but we are 10 persons on the board, not 150. So it means that, of course, we will not have the opportunity to add all the persons that we need to meet all the requirements talking about diversity. But let me tell you something. At the moment, we do not have persons coming from Alberta, nobody coming from Manitoba. No, we have one. It's in Saskatchewan. Alberta, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and territories are totally absent around the table of the board. So, and we do not have indigenous representative as well. But we created, with the bylaw we developed and approved last week, we created and put in 5 standing committees of the board. And we determined that we will have to add 10 persons coming from the community to contribute to the committees of the board, the standing committees, I mean. I'm talking about the governance committee, the external relationship committee, the strategic planning committee, the nominations committee, and one more. What is it? Yes, this is the performance appraisal committee. So, of course, we will give priority to have persons on this committee to contribute to be more respectful about the wish to have representation of the diversity of the Canadian society. It is the best we can do at the moment.
Okay, thank you. We're pretty much closing in on our end of day time period, but we'll take one more question if there's any pressing question. Is there anybody who has a burning question? These people will hopefully be available. We have a little gathering outside after this where we can do some more discussions informally with each other and catch up on different parts of, meet and greet with others who you want to introduce yourself to. And there's a number of people from CASDO who can answer some more questions if you have some. So thank you all, the panel, for your participation as an audience as well. Some great questions there. Challenging us all to think more deeply about how we can be inclusive.
Can I ask, have the opportunity just to give you the email address if you want to get a copy of the PowerPoint? It is CASDO. If you want to take note of this, it's casdo.info, I-N-F-O, .ocena, I will spell it, O-C-E-N-A, at canada.gc.ca. I will repeat it, casdo.info.ocena@canada.gc.ca. If you send a request there, you will receive a copy of the PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you all. Al, is there anything else you want to update people for what's happening tomorrow at this point? Okay, 8 o'clock, there's a full breakfast again tomorrow? 8:45 sharp, we start. Pardon? And then there's a reception happening right now, just outside there. So please join us for a gathering afterwards.